The rock festival was supposed to be our thing. Sandra and I had been going to this muddy, beer-soaked celebration of mediocre local bands for 3 years running. But as I watched my wife climb onto her ex-boyfriend's shoulders in front of 500 drunk strangers, screaming, "You're so much taller and better than my husband," I realized our thing had become her thing with someone else. I'm Jake Morrison, 32 years old, and I fix cars for a living. Not glamorous, but honest work that keeps my hands dirty and my conscience clean. At least it used to. Standing there in the mosh pit, watching Sandra wave her arms like some teenage groupie while perched on Derek's shoulders, I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Hey, Jake!" Derek shouted over the screaming guitars, his perfect white teeth gleaming in the stage lights. "Hope you don't mind me borrowing your wife for the show." Mind? Why would I mind watching my wife of 4 years publicly humiliate me in front of half our town? Sandra looked down at me from her elevated perch, her eyes glassy with beer and something else I didn't want to identify. She'd been different lately, colder at home, working late more often, buying new clothes she claimed were for professional development at the accounting firm. "Come on, Jake, don't be such a downer," Sandra shouted, her voice cutting through the music. "Derek was just being friendly." Nice. Right. Derek Patterson, Sandra's college boyfriend who'd mysteriously reappeared in our lives 6 months ago when he got transferred to our sleepy post-industrial town. Derek with his marketing job and his BMW and his perfect hair that never seemed to get messed up, even in a crowd of sweaty metalheads. I turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd toward the beer tent. Behind me, I could hear Sandra laughing. That high, artificial laugh she'd developed recently. The same one she used when her coworkers called the house. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Jake, where are you going?" That was my buddy Deke, all 250 pounds of him, squeezing through the crowd after me. Deke owned a boxing gym downtown and had been my best friend since high school. "The headliner's about to come on." "I'm done," I said, not stopping. I guess the mosh pit wasn't the only thing she wanted to dive into tonight. Deke caught up to me at the beer tent, where I was ordering a double whiskey instead of my usual beer. "Man, you can't let Derek get to you like this. Sandra's just having fun." "Fun?" I knocked back the whiskey, feeling it burn. "Yeah, she's having a lot of fun lately. Working late, going out with the girls, buying lingerie she never wears at home." "You think she's cheating?" I looked back toward the stage where Sandra was still riding Derek's shoulders, her hands in his hair, moving to the music in a way that made my stomach turn. I think I need to find out. The festival ended with Sandra stumbling back to our car an hour later, Derek's arm around her waist for support. She reeked of beer and his cologne. "Where did you go?" she slurred as I helped her into the passenger seat. "Derek was looking for you. He wanted to buy you a drink." "I bet he did." "Don't be like that, Jake. God, you're so paranoid lately. Derek's just a friend." Friends don't hold their friends' wives like that, but I didn't say it. Instead, I drove us home through the empty streets of our town, past the closed shops and flickering streetlights, while Sandra dozed against the window. Our house sat on Maple Street, a modest 2-bedroom we'd bought when we got married. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, or at least it had been. Lately it felt more like a hotel where 2 strangers happened to sleep in the same bed. I helped Sandra inside and up to our bedroom, where she collapsed fully clothed on top of the covers. As I was pulling off her shoes, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a text message. From Derek. "Thanks for tonight. Can't wait for tomorrow." My hands froze on Sandra's shoe. Tomorrow? What was tomorrow? Sandra's phone buzzed again. Another message from Derek. "Hotel room is booked. Noon, like we planned." The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. Sandra stirred but didn't wake. I stood there in our bedroom, staring down at my unconscious wife, feeling like the floor had opened up beneath me. Hotel room, noon, like we planned. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. It was unlocked. Sandra never could remember to set a passcode. I scrolled through her messages with Derek, my heart pounding harder with each exchange. "Jake's working late tomorrow. Perfect timing. I can't wait to get my hands on you again. This sneaking around is so hot. Poor Jake has no idea. He's too stupid to notice anyway." The messages went back weeks, months, detailed plans for meetups, complaints about me, jokes at my expense. My wife and her ex-boyfriend laughing at the dumb mechanic who couldn't see what was happening right under his nose. But the worst part was the group chat. Sandra had been sharing screenshots of our private conversations with her friends from work, mocking the things I said, the gifts I bought her, even the way I looked when I slept. Fiona, her best friend. When are you going to dump the loser? Sandra. Soon. I'm just waiting for the right moment. Derek makes twice what Jake does. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. 4 years of marriage. 4 years of me working overtime to pay for her CPA courses, supporting her career, believing in us. And she'd been planning to leave me for months. I looked down at Sandra, passed out on our bed in the clothes I'd watched her wear to seduce another man. The cold feeling in my chest was spreading, turning into something harder and sharper. They thought I was too stupid to notice. Too much of a loser to fight back. We'd see about that. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in our kitchen with Sandra's phone, reading through months of betrayal. Every late night at the office, every girls' night out, every time she'd been too tired or too stressed for intimacy with me, it had all been lies. By morning, I had a complete picture. The affair had started 3 months after Derek moved to town. Sandra had been feeding him information about our finances, our problems, even intimate details about our marriage. Her friend Fiona had been helping, providing alibis, and encouraging Sandra to upgrade from her blue-collar husband. The worst part was discovering that it was an open secret at Sandra's accounting firm. Her coworkers knew. Her boss knew. They'd been taking bets on how long it would take me to figure it out. Sandra stumbled downstairs at 10 a.m., clutching her head and groaning about her hangover. She was wearing one of my old T-shirts and looked nothing like the seductress from the night before. God, I feel terrible, she moaned, shuffling to the coffee maker. How much did I drink last night? Enough to get very friendly with Derek, I said, watching her carefully. She froze for just a second, so briefly I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking for it. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just that you two seem to be having a good time. He's an old friend, Jake. We were just catching up. She poured coffee with shaking hands. You're being paranoid again. Paranoid. That was her favorite word lately. Anytime I questioned her behavior, anytime I asked about her schedule, I was being paranoid. Maybe I am, I said. Maybe I should stop being so paranoid and start trusting you more. She looked relieved. That would be nice. This jealousy thing isn't attractive, Jake. You're right. In fact, why don't you take the day off? Relax. Recover from last night. I'll handle everything. Sandra smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me in weeks. Really? That would be amazing. I do feel awful. Of course. What are husbands for? After she went back upstairs for a shower, I got to work. First, I made copies of everything on her phone, screenshots, contact information, the whole digital trail of her affair. Then I started making calls. My first call was to Deke. I need a favor, and it's going to sound crazy. Lay it on me. I need you to follow Sandra today. She's meeting Derek at a hotel at noon. Silence. Then, shit, Jake. You sure about this? I've got the text messages. I just need proof I can use. Use for what? I haven't decided yet, but I'm done being the stupid husband who doesn't know what's going on. My second call was to my buddy Tony, who ran a private investigation service on the side. I need photos, I told him. Hotel parking lot, license plates, timestamps, the works. This is going to cost you. Put it on my tab. My third call was to Sandra's office. I disguised my voice and claimed to be from the hotel, confirming a reservation for Derek Patterson and Sandra Morrison. The receptionist, clearly in on the secret, giggled and said she'd pass along the message that everything was set up perfectly. By 11:30, I had a surveillance team in place, and Sandra was getting dressed upstairs, humming to herself as she picked out lingerie I'd never seen before. I'm going shopping with Fiona, she called down to me. Might be gone all afternoon. Have fun, I called back. Take your time. I watched from our front window as she drove away in the Honda I'd bought her for our anniversary. She looked happy, excited even, probably thinking about her afternoon with Derek while her stupid husband worked on cars and suspected nothing. But I wasn't going to work on cars today. Instead, I drove to the Riverside Motor Lodge, a shabby place on the outskirts of town that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. I parked across the street and waited. Derek's BMW pulled in at exactly noon. Sandra's Honda arrived 5 minutes later. I watched my wife of 4 years hurry across the parking lot and disappear into room 237 with another man. My phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Got everything? License plates, faces, timestamps. This is pretty damning stuff, Jake. Another buzz. This one from Deke. Jesus, man. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? What did I want him to do? What did I want to do? 6 hours ago, I'd been a faithful husband who suspected his wife might be cheating. Now I was sitting in a parking lot with photographic evidence of her betrayal, feeling something cold and calculating take root in my chest. Sandra thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Her friends thought I was a loser she'd eventually dump. Derek thought he could steal my wife, and I'd never know. They were all about to learn how wrong they were. I started the car and drove to Derek's apartment complex, a fancy place downtown with a doorman and underground parking. Derek's BMW wouldn't be back for hours, which gave me plenty of time to get acquainted with his living situation. The doorman was reading a newspaper and barely looked up when I walked in wearing coveralls and carrying a toolbox. "Maintenance," I said. "Got a call about a leak in 4B. "Nobody told me about any maintenance," I shrugged. "You want to explain to the owner why his ceiling collapsed because you wouldn't let the repair guy in?" He waved me through. Derek's apartment was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and chrome and expensive furniture that looked like it came from a catalog. Everything was perfect, sterile, soulless. Just like Derek. I didn't break anything. I didn't steal anything. I just adjusted things. Loosened some screws on his expensive chairs, reprogrammed his thermostat to randomly spike to 90 degrees, put a small hole in his waterbed. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create a slow leak that would ruin his hardwood floors over the next few days. And I left a note on his pillow. "Hope you're better in bed than you are at keeping secrets. A concerned neighbor." By the time I got home, Sandra was already there, showered and changed, acting like she'd spent the day shopping. "How was your day?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "Productive," I said. "Very productive. How was shopping with Fiona?" "Fine. We didn't find much." She was a terrible liar, but she'd never had to be good at it before. I'd always believed everything she told me. "That's too bad. Maybe next time you'll have better luck." She nodded and went to start dinner, humming the same tune she'd been humming that morning, the same tune that was probably stuck in her head from her afternoon with Derek. I sat at our kitchen table, watching my wife cook dinner and lie to my face, and felt the last of my love for her die. In its place was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Sandra thought she was married to a stupid, trusting mechanic who would never fight back. She was about to meet her husband's evil twin. The next few days were educational. I played the role of the oblivious husband while secretly documenting every aspect of Sandra's deception. I installed a GPS tracker on her car. Easy enough when you know your way around vehicles. I set up a voice recorder in her purse. I even befriended the janitor at her office, a guy named Pete who saw everything and remembered more. "Your wife's real popular around here," Pete told me over beers at Murphy's Tavern. "Always staying late with that marketing guy. Real dedicated to her work, if you know what I mean." I knew exactly what he meant. "The whole office thinks it's hilarious," Pete continued. "They got a pool going on when you'll figure it out. Most people bet you never would." "What did you bet?" I asked. Pete looked uncomfortable. "I didn't bet nothing, Jake. I like you. You always tip good when you pick up Sandra's car from the shop." That was Pete, decent guy in a world full of people who thought my pain was entertainment. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to destroy Sandra in any divorce court in the state. But divorce seemed too clean, too easy. Sandra and Derek and all their friends expected me to be the victim, the poor dumb husband who got cheated on and slunk away to lick his wounds. I had other plans. The first phase was financial. Sandra had always handled our money. She was the accountant, after all. She had no idea I'd been secretly photographing bank statements and credit card bills for months. When you suspect your spouse is cheating, you learn to pay attention to unusual expenses, like hotel charges, expensive restaurants I'd never been to, lingerie purchases that never made it home, a second cell phone bill I'd never seen. Sandra thought she was being clever, but she'd left a paper trail a blind man could follow. I started by opening my own accounts at a different bank. Then I began moving money, slowly, carefully, always staying within legal limits. Joint accounts became individual accounts. Automatic deposits got redirected. Credit cards got canceled and replaced. Sandra was so distracted by her affair that she didn't notice her financial world being dismantled piece by piece. The second phase was social. I started showing up at Sandra's office building around lunchtime, always with flowers or coffee or some other thoughtful gesture. Her coworkers would see me being the devoted husband while Sandra was upstairs planning her next rendezvous with Derek. "You're so lucky," her secretary would tell Sandra. "Jake is such a sweetheart." I made sure to be extra affectionate in public, holding Sandra's hand, opening doors, playing the part of the loving husband. It made her uncomfortable. I could see it in her eyes. But she couldn't complain without seeming ungrateful. Meanwhile, I was building relationships with everyone in Sandra's orbit. her coworkers, her friends, even her mother. I became the sympathetic figure, the devoted husband who was trying so hard to make his marriage work while his wife grew distant and cold. "I'm worried about Sandra," I confided to her mother during one of our regular phone calls. "She's been working so much lately, and she seems stressed. I just want her to be happy." "You're a good man, Jake," Mrs. Chen said. "Sandra doesn't know how lucky she is." If only she knew. The third phase was psychological. I started leaving little hints that I knew more than I was letting on. Nothing direct, just small comments that would make Sandra wonder if her secret was still safe. "Derek called looking for you yesterday," I'd mentioned casually. "I told him you were at work, but he said you weren't there. Weird." Or, "I ran into Fiona at the grocery store. She seemed surprised when I mentioned your shopping trip last Tuesday. Said she thought you were working late." Each little inconsistency was like a grain of sand in Sandra's shoe. Not enough to cause real pain, but enough to create constant, nagging discomfort. I watched her become more paranoid, more careful about covering her tracks. She started leaving her phone face down. She began taking calls in the other room. She even started being nicer to me, as if kindness could somehow balance out her betrayal. But the most satisfying part was watching Derek squirm. My little visit to his apartment had rattled him more than I'd expected. The note on his pillow had sent him into a panic, wondering who knew about the affair and what they might do with the information. He'd had his locks changed. He'd filed a complaint with his building management about security issues. He'd even started varying his schedule, probably worried that Sandra's husband was finally catching on. He was right to be worried. "Jake's been acting weird lately," I overheard Sandra telling Fiona during one of their phone calls. "Like he knows something but isn't saying anything." "Maybe he hired a private investigator," Fiona suggested. "Don't be ridiculous. Jake doesn't have that kind of money. Besides, he's not that smart." Not that smart. There it was again, their favorite insult. The foundation of their entire plan was their belief that I was too stupid and too trusting to be a threat. I was about to show them how wrong they were. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Sandra announced that her company was having a summer picnic, a big outdoor event with employees and their families. Spouses were not just invited, but expected to attend. "It's important for my career that you make a good impression," Sandra told me. "These are important people, Jake. Please don't embarrass me." Embarrass her? That was rich, coming from a woman who was planning to leave me for her ex-boyfriend. "Of course," I said. "I'll be the perfect husband." And I would be. Right up until the moment I decided not to be. The picnic was held at Riverside Park, the same place where Sandra and I had had our first date 7 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning to where our love story began just as I was about to end it. Derek was there, of course, playing the role of the charming colleague. He and Sandra were careful not to seem too friendly in public, but I could see the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. I spent the afternoon being the ideal spouse, helping with the setup, chatting with Sandra's coworkers, complimenting her boss on the company's success. I was funny, charming, and completely unthreatening. "Your husband is delightful," Sandra's boss told her during the barbecue. "You're lucky to have such a supportive partner." Sandra smiled tightly. "Yes, I'm very lucky." As the afternoon wore on and the alcohol flowed more freely, people began making toasts. Sandra's boss talked about the company's bright future. A senior partner praised the team's hard work. Even Derek raised his glass to friendship and loyalty. That's when I stood up. "I'd like to make a toast, too," I announced, raising my beer bottle. The crowd quieted, turning to look at me. The blue-collar husband who didn't quite fit in with all these white-collar professionals. "I want to toast my beautiful wife, Sandra," I began, smiling at her across the picnic table. She looked nervous, probably wondering what embarrassing thing her working-class husband was about to say. 4 years ago, I married the most amazing woman in the world. Smart, beautiful, ambitious, everything a man could want in a partner. I paused, letting the crowd murmur their agreement. Sandra has taught me so much about trust, about commitment, about the importance of keeping promises. Sandra's face was getting pale. She could sense something coming, but couldn't figure out what. "She's also taught me about friendship," I continued, turning to smile at Derek. "About how important it is to maintain relationships with people from your past. Old friends who really understand you, who share your history, who know exactly what you need." Derek was starting to look uncomfortable, too. Good. "So here's to Sandra and Derek," I said, raising my bottle higher. "To old friends who found each other again. May your relationship continue to grow stronger, and may all your secrets stay buried." I drained my beer in one long swallow while the crowd applauded uncertainly. They could sense the undercurrent of tension but couldn't quite identify it. Sandra was staring at me with wide eyes. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. And I just smiled, the picture of an innocent husband who'd simply made a heartfelt toast to his wife and her dear friend. But they knew. In that moment, both Sandra and Derek realized that their secret wasn't secret anymore. The game was about to begin. The ride home from the picnic was silent, except for the radio playing classic rock and the sound of Sandra's fingers drumming nervously on the car door. She kept glancing at me, trying to read my expression, but I kept my eyes on the road and my face neutral. It wasn't until we were inside our house that she finally spoke. "What was that about?" she asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "What was what about?" "That toast. All that stuff about secrets and old friends." I shrugged, loosening my tie. "Just being friendly. Derek seems like a nice guy." "Jake." She grabbed my arm as I headed toward the stairs. "Do you know something?" I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. For a moment, I considered telling her everything about the phone messages, the surveillance photos, the months of lies I'd uncovered. Part of me wanted to see her face when she realized how thoroughly I'd exposed her deception. But that would end the game too quickly. "Know something about what?" I asked innocently. She searched my face, looking for any sign that I was lying. "Nothing. Never mind." But over the next few days, Sandra's paranoia grew. She started checking her phone obsessively, making sure she hadn't left it unlocked. She began taking her purse with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She stopped humming that little tune. Meanwhile, Derek was having problems of his own. The slow leak in his waterbed had finally done enough damage to require professional repairs. His apartment's hardwood floors were warped and stained. His landlord was threatening to sue him for the damage. "It's the weirdest thing," I overheard him telling Sandra during one of their careful phone conversations. "The repair guy says it looks like sabotage, but who would do something like that?" Who indeed? But my real masterpiece was still in development. See, I'd learned something interesting from Pete, the janitor at Sandra's office. The company was planning a big presentation for a potential client, a presentation that Derek was leading and Sandra was supporting. It was a career-making opportunity for both of them. It was also scheduled for the same day as the annual Riverside Music Festival, the biggest event of the summer. Half the town would be there, including most of Sandra's coworkers and their families. I bought tickets for Sandra and myself, making a big show of how excited I was to spend a romantic evening with my wife. She couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious, even though I could tell she'd rather be anywhere else. "I thought we could make it a double date," I suggested casually. "Maybe invite Derek and whatever woman he's seeing these days." Sandra choked on her coffee. "Derek? Why would we invite Derek? He seems lonely, and you two are such good friends. I bet he'd love to join us." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? Unless there's some reason you don't want Derek there?" She couldn't answer that without revealing too much, so she just mumbled something about not wanting to impose on his time. But I'd already called Derek myself. "Sandra suggested I invite you to the music festival," I told him. "She thought you might be lonely, spending another evening by yourself." I could practically hear him sweating through the phone. That's very thoughtful, but I'm not sure I can make it." "Sandra will be so disappointed. She specifically asked me to invite you. Said something about how much fun you two had at the last festival." Long pause. "She said that?" "Oh, yes. She talks about you all the time. Derek this, Derek that. I'm starting to think she likes you more than she likes me." Another pause. I'll see if I can make it." "Great. It'll be just like old times." The festival was held in the same field where this whole nightmare had started, but this time I was the one with the plan. I'd spent weeks setting the stage, and now it was time for the final act. Sandra was a nervous wreck by the time we arrived. She kept looking around for Derek, probably trying to figure out how to manage the situation without exposing their relationship. When he finally showed up, looking as uncomfortable as she did, I waved him over with a big smile. "Derek, glad you could make it." I clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "Sandra's been looking forward to this all week." "Has she?" Derek glanced at Sandra, who was giving him a warning look. "Oh, yes. She loves spending time with old friends. Don't you, honey?" Sandra managed a weak smile. "Of course." The first few bands were local groups. Nothing special. I made sure to buy plenty of drinks for all of us, keeping Derek and Sandra relaxed while I stayed sharp. I told jokes, shared stories, played the part of the friendly husband who was just happy to be out with his wife and her good friend. But I was watching, waiting, looking for the perfect moment. It came during the headliner's set, when the crowd was at its most energetic and the alcohol had done its work. Derek had gotten careless, letting his hand linger on Sandra's back when he thought I wasn't looking. Sandra had forgotten to maintain her distance, laughing at his jokes and touching his arm. They thought I was too drunk to notice. They thought the music was too loud for anyone to hear what they were saying. They were wrong on both counts. "I need some air," Sandra announced during a particularly loud song. "This crowd is making me claustrophobic." "I'll come with you," Derek said immediately. "Great idea," I agreed. "I could use a break too." I followed them away from the main stage to a quieter area near the beer tents, where the music was just background noise and conversations were possible. Sandra and Derek were walking close together, probably thinking they were finally alone. "This is so stressful," I heard Sandra say. "I think he knows something." "Maybe we should cool it for a while," Derek replied, "just until things settle down." "I don't want to cool it. I want to be with you." "I want that too, but what? You're getting cold feet?" "I'm being practical. If Jake finds out..." "Jake won't find out. He's too stupid to put the pieces together." That's when I stepped out of the shadows. "You know what, Sandra?" I said conversationally. "I'm getting really tired of being called stupid." They spun around, faces white with shock. Derek looked like he was about to run. Sandra looked like she was about to throw up. "Jake," she stammered, "You weren't what? Having an affair behind my back for the past 6 months? Planning to leave me for your ex-boyfriend? Making jokes about how dumb I am with all your friends at work?" Derek stepped protectively in front of Sandra. "Look, Jake, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got the text messages, the hotel receipts, the photos. I've got recordings of you two planning your future together while spending my money. I've got evidence of every lie you've told and every promise you've broken." Sandra's face crumpled. "How long have you known?" "Months. I've been watching you, listening to you, documenting everything. Did you really think you could outsmart me? I might just be a mechanic, but I'm not the idiot you thought I was." Derek was looking around nervously, probably hoping no one else was witnessing this scene. "Jake, let's be reasonable here. We can work this out like adults." "Adults?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back. Adults don't mock their partner with their friends. Adults don't plan to steal everything and run away with their lover. "I never meant for it to happen," Sandra said, tears streaming down her face. It just happened." "Bullshit. I've seen the messages, Sandra. You planned this whole thing. You've been playing me for months, maybe years. Well, congratulations. You played the stupid mechanic perfectly." "What are you going to do?" Derek asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. I smiled, and it must have been a terrible smile because both of them took a step back. "I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve," I said, "both of you." And then I walked away, leaving them standing there in the dark, finally understanding that the game had changed and they were no longer the ones in control. The real fun was about to begin.